the video about how to write an essay. I don't want to get too prescriptive here and say that 5-paragraph essays are the only type of essays to be writing, but they are the academic standard, and generally this is the type of essay that you will be asked to write. 5-paragraph essays come in the following format, with an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. So there are 5 paragraphs. And your body doesn't always have to be 3, it can be 6, it can be 2, it can be 20. How you choose to write the body paragraphs is up to you, but again, the 5-paragraph essay is really the standard that you'll see. This is a different visual for you with just an introduction, your 3 main points, and your conclusion. And again, your 3 main points make up the body paragraph. So I'm going to go through an example. This example will be Dracula by Bram Stoker. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a horror novel, and this is the first novel to address the vampire as a monster. So the first thing you're going to do is write your introduction. I generally start with a thesis and then my main points, and then write my first sentence. And the thesis I've chosen to use here is that Dracula plans to conquer England and suck the blood out of everyone he can. My thesis is my topic. A thesis statement is argumentative. It can be proven. And the whole point of my essay is I'm going to prove my thesis correct. And at the end of my essay, you will know from my evidence that I give that Dracula does plan to conquer England and suck the blood of everyone he can. The 3 main points, or the topics that I will use to prove my thesis, are the Count's conquest of Lucy, his attacks on Mina, and the death of the crew. I'll demonstrate Dracula's desire to destroy the British. For your introductory statement, or the first sentence in your essay, you can start with startling information. This includes statistics, facts, things that would scare you. It can be funny anecdotes. In a story about Dracula, it would be entertaining to make a joke about Twilight. You can start with a question. I like to start with background information a lot of the time, just because that's a personal preference of mine. So the sentence I start with is, the novel Dracula by Bram Stoker is the story of an evil count penetrating England to suck innocent victims' blood. When you're writing about a piece of literature, you absolutely have to include the title and the author of the literature that you're writing about. It doesn't have to appear in your very first sentence, but it does have to appear somewhere in your introductory paragraph. Without it, your reader is lost and confused and really has no concept of what you're talking about anywhere. From there, we would move on to our main point 1. This is your first body paragraph. Your first sentence is going to be a topic sentence, which should just be a restatement of your main point 1, which for me was Dracula attacks Lucy and ultimately turns her into a vampiress. Note that I've provided evidence that comes directly from the text. What you're seeing here is a parenthetical citation that tells you directly where that information came from. In text, this is particularly helpful when you're writing about literature, because then I can go back to that book and find out what page you're referencing and see that information. I would like to note that the evidence I've provided is not a direct quote. It is paraphrased, so I don't need quotation marks. When utilizing evidence, it's important not to just necessarily copy and paste, but to paraphrase and still give credit. Anytime you provide evidence, you need to explain your evidence. Just because you've provided good evidence doesn't mean that your reader will completely understand what it is you're getting at. So all evidence requires an explanation, like you see here. Moving on to main point 2, which this would be a new paragraph. Again, I start with my topic sentence, which is my second main point. Dracula visits Mina several times to suck her blood. Once again, you see me providing evidence with the parenthetical citation telling you, if you pick up the version of Dracula that I have, you'll find the Count forcing Mina to drink his blood, which we ultimately find out would lead them to becoming partners or in a vampire relationship. Again, you see an explanation of what this means and how Dracula is attacking Mina in an attempt to force her into his vampire army. So note that with my explanations, I'm always tying back to my thesis, which is that Dracula is coming to conquer Britain. So all of your explanations should try to tie your evidence back to your thesis. And then I have my main point 3. This would be my final body paragraph. Again, starting with the topic sentence, Dracula murders everyone on the ship he uses to come to England. Once again, my statement of evidence with a parenthetical citation and the explanation of how this evidence proves my thesis correctly. Finally, I will move into my conclusion. This is my last paragraph that I have to write. You start your conclusion by restating your thesis. Dracula has come to England with the intention of conquering it and murdering everyone he can. And then restating your 3 main points. This is your opportunity to say, I've proven my thesis. The Count kills everyone on board his ship, and he seduces Lucy and attempts the same thing with Nina. So again, it's just a restating of my main points in a new and interesting way. And then always tie back to the very first sentence that you wrote in your essay. My example here is Bram Stoker's novel tells of the horrors a vampire inflicts on the citizens of England. Dracula was the beginning of a new horror genre that has continued to influence literature. Once again, take note that I've mentioned the author and the title of the literature that I'm talking about. Just like your introductory paragraph, your concluding paragraph must, absolutely must, utilize the title and author of the literature that you're talking about. So cut and paste it all together. This is what my final product of the essay would look like. Please note the indentations at the beginning of every paragraph. It's not one big monster paragraph. One of the things that terrifies me most as a teacher is when I open an essay and it's the one big block of text. If you do that, I will send it back to you and ask you to turn it into paragraphs. They should be cohesive and clear. It's incredibly important to go back through and reread your essay having finished it. So what I would do now with my final product is reread it out loud, so that way I make sure I catch if there's any awkward phrasing or wording. I know that when I was reading one of them, I kept inserting the word of. Dracula plans to conquer England and suck the blood of everyone he can. Nope, it's correct there. Story of an evil count and creating England to suck innocent victims' blood. Well, I would go back through and reread it to double check. This is also your opportunity to double check spelling. And make sure that if you're going to cite sources and include parenthetical citations, that you do include a works cited page. In order to find that information, you can look at the OWL Purdue website. And this is a literature example. Now moving on to a history example, I'm going to cover how to write a historical essay. This one will be a brief history of Iran. Once again, going through this thesis I've chosen when discussing the history of Iran is about having foreign powers try to gain influence. And this is one of the reasons that Iran is closed off today. Notice again, this isn't just some sort of statement. This is a fact, or excuse me, this is an opinion that can be argued using fact. The facts that I'm going to use to argue that opinion are my 3 main points: that Alexander the Great, the Umayyads bringing Islam, and Britain and Russian intervention during World War I are the reasons that Iran is so hostile to foreign powers today, because they've had so much intervention. And then again, I think when writing a historical essay, it's simple and easy to use background information. If you want to use startling facts, questions, that's up to you. For this essay, I wrote the history of Iran is long and turbulent. There have been invasions, revivals, crises, and revolutions. So notice that this flows really nicely to talk about the crises, revolutions, revivals, and such in my 3 main points. Moving into my first body paragraph, you'll see that I talk about Alexander the Great, which is the order that I discussed it in my introductory paragraph. Important to note is that I don't have parenthetical citations in this essay. If you're going to use evidence, though, I do recommend that you include parenthetical citations. At the very least, if you're not going to include parenthetical citations, you will need to have a works cited page at the end. I would move into my main point 2. Again, my topic sentence about the Umayyads, which ties back into evidence and then the explanation. Finally, a main point 3, which was during World War I, talking about Iran, Britain, and Russia, and the relationships that were happening there. And again, explaining it and tying it always back to my thesis statement. Finally, a concluding paragraph would restate the thesis, restate the main points, and tie back into the introductory sentence. Don't be afraid to include some voice in your writing. You can see here on my restatement of my 3 main points. It says, whether it was Alexander, Islam, or good old Britain, Iran has had to adjust to the will of others. Inserting phrases like good old Britain lets my voice shine through. As long as your informative essays don't become too heavy on voice, it's perfectly acceptable to include some of yourself in your essay. Again, a final product, notice that it's indented and it looks good. This doesn't look daunting or like it's too much text to read. A few more things I want to mention is that in neither of these essays did I ever say, in this essay I'm going to talk about, or I have written an essay about. Try not to include any of those types of phrases in your essay writing. As a reader of your essay, I can see that you've written an essay because I'm reading it. I can tell what it's about because you're going to give me a good introduction that will be solid and will give me a good background. So try to avoid those statements at all cost. I think that's all I have for you. If you have any questions about essay writing or need additional information and help, don't hesitate to contact me. I'll see you in class.